Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
I destroyed my parents' reputation with an email after they missed my wedding. They ended up invading my house at 4 a.m. I am 31 years old and I got married recently. My brother Gerald was not invited because our relationship is not good, which was to be expected. However, what I did not expect was that my parents would not attend either. It all happened because Gerald, in an act of spite, organized an excessive party for his 28th birthday the night before my wedding. He sent out invitations to the whole family about a week before my ceremony, clearly annoyed at not having been invited. He spared no expense. He hired a huge venue, a well-known local band and even a comedian to provide the entertainment. As far as I could tell, the food and drinks would have been equally lavish. I found out about the party when a cousin showed me the invitation. For a moment, I was really worried that people might prefer to go to their celebration instead of our wedding. But then I thought that, even if that happened, there wasn't much we could do. My wife and I were aware that people would have to choose, as it was practically impossible to attend both events. The party was in the city and our wedding was being held in a hotel almost 8 hours away. We decided not to say anything to our guests, leaving them to make their own decision. Fortunately for us, they all chose to come to the wedding. Looking back, it seems silly that we worried, as a wedding naturally carries more weight than a birthday. The only ones who didn't show up were my parents, which was completely unexpected. Despite having had an argument days before the wedding, I never imagined that they would choose to go to their party and miss my wedding. The argument happened during a phone call, and afterwards I was so busy with the final preparations that I couldn't contact them, although they didn't try either. I never thought they would miss it because a wedding is a crucial moment in someone's life, especially when it's your own child. The argument arose over the party and the wedding. After seeing the invitation my cousin showed me, I called my parents to tell them what was happening, hoping they would support me and talk to my brother to get him to reconsider. Instead, they told me it was my fault for not inviting him to the wedding and for not putting our differences behind us. According to them, he had the right to act with spite and they were not going to intervene to calm the situation, arguing that we were no longer children and it did not seem appropriate for them to get involved. I must admit that I was very upset that my parents tried to justify my brother's vindictive behavior. I confronted them about it and we had a heated argument that ended when I told them that if they really believed he was doing the right thing by causing trouble, then they should just go to his party and not bother coming to the wedding. After that, we didn't speak to each other until the day before the ceremony. On the morning of the wedding, as we were on our way to the hotel, I tried repeatedly to call them because they were supposed to be coming with us. The car we sent to pick them up returned empty and the driver informed us that he had been ringing the doorbell and trying to contact them without success. I kept trying to get in touch with them throughout the day, but no one answered. By the evening, I had to accept that they probably wouldn't come. Even on the morning of the wedding, just before the ceremony, I was still hoping they would turn up and I kept calling them, but they didn't arrive and I had to get married without them. It could have affected me more, but I was marrying the love of my life, so I didn't let these circumstances tarnish the moment. After the ceremony, I decided that I would not try to contact them again, as they had missed the most important event of my life. During the reception, I finally received their call and answered out of curiosity, wanting to know what they had to say. They told me that, as I had asked them not to bother coming to the wedding, that is exactly what they did, but they still wanted to congratulate me. I thought they were referring to the wedding, but then they clarified that they were congratulating me not only for the marriage, but also for getting away with it. It turned out that no one in the family had attended Gerald's party, and my parents were angry with me, accusing me of having manipulated everyone against my brother, as not only had they missed the party, but they had also reprimanded him for his behavior through messages and calls. Although his friends and co-workers did attend, the party had been a failure because he was expecting many more people. Only a small group arrived compared to his expectations, and now Gerald is not only disappointed with the family, but he has also lost a lot of money, and somehow this is supposed to be my fault, as my parents were convinced that I had influenced the family against him, although any reasonable person would have acted the same way. During the call, I apologized to the guests and went out to talk to them about the situation. I expressed my deep disappointment to them because they had decided to miss my wedding for something so petty, and on top of that they accused me of manipulating the situation, even though the family had made their own decisions. I was really furious with them. I reprimanded them severely, but they replied that they didn't care what I thought because, according to them, I was jealous and insecure about my brother and that's why I was acting like this. That was the last straw. I hung up, blocked them and decided to enjoy the rest of the night without thinking about them, because I didn't want them to ruin the best day of my life. It's been a few days since the wedding, and I finally decided to make a statement about what happened because a lot of people had questions about my parents' absence. As they couldn't even imagine that they had chosen to go to Gerald's party, I sent an email to all the guests explaining the whole situation in detail: the party my brother organized, the argument with my parents, what I told them about not bothering to come to the wedding, and the phone conversation during the reception. I laid everything out with no details left out. Now everyone is rejecting them, and again they blame me, saying that I am creating unnecessary drama and being mean to my family. Maybe they're right. So am I the bad guy for revealing in detail why my parents didn't attend my wedding and turning the family against them? Addition: since many people asked about why my brother and I didn't get along, there is no specific incident that explains it. Even as children, we were never very close. As we grew up, the distance between us increased. He always seemed to be a bit jealous of me, constantly copying me and things like that, which irritated me a lot. We started to have conflicts, and by the time we reached secondary school, there was already a mutual dislike. I went to university and stayed there for work, visiting home occasionally. But even during those visits, he was unbearable, making comments about my appearance, my salary and similar things, which really annoyed me. I started to ignore him completely because I knew I would have to see him and it wasn't worth responding to his provocations and creating more conflict. Over time, seeing that I wasn't giving him the satisfaction of reacting, we simply stopped talking to each other, and when we met at family gatherings, we ignored each other. There was no specific moment that triggered this situation. It was an accumulation of tensions over the years, and that's why we didn't get along and I didn't invite him to the wedding. I don't think I did anything wrong. I don't even think he expected to be invited, and if he did, it would have been a rather unreasonable expectation. As for my parents, they know perfectly well why I stopped talking to him. At first they tried to mediate, but it didn't work. Finally, they gave up too. However, they had never shown favoritism to either of us. As far as I can remember, they always tried to be fair to both of us, and that's why I was so surprised by their recent reaction, because I felt that they were being unfairly biased towards him, something that had never happened before. Anyway, things are the way they are. There's no way to change them now. Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone who commented. It helped a lot to be assured that this is not my fault and that I have nothing to regret. I have deleted all the emails that my parents have been sending to my inbox since I revealed the truth to the family, and I have blocked them everywhere. They can keep creating new accounts to contact me, but I'm not going to take back what I said about them. Besides, it's not like I made things up or spread lies about them. I simply exposed the truth. In the email I sent to the family, I didn't even include my personal feelings. I just described the situation exactly as it happened, and that was it. People could draw their own conclusions and decide what to do. If they decide to cut ties with my parents because of their behavior, that's not my problem. By the wedding day, I had already been accused of turning the family against Gerald, so I simply did what I had already been accused of. Why should I suffer the punishment without having committed the crime? At least what I did was much more direct and less pathetic than what they are trying to do now. My cousins and other relatives have shown me the email they sent in response to mine, where they say that I have always been jealous and insecure of Gerald, and that although my brother organized a last-minute party, it was only because I had tried hard to make him feel bad. According to them, he was only responding to my actions. They invented a story that never happened. Supposedly, a couple of weeks after sending out the invitations to the family, I called Gerald to make fun of the fact that I was inviting everyone except him because he wasn't good enough. Apparently, I told him that my in-laws are from a wealthy family and that I didn't want them to know that my brother was a freelancer with no future. Obviously, none of that happened, and anyone who knows me well will refuse to believe such a story. The family hasn't believed anything they've said about me, so I haven't even bothered to clarify anything because I know they're lying and no one will believe them. But I have to say it's pretty funny that they have to resort to lies to make me look like the bad guy just to clean up their image. And by doing so, they are only making things worse for themselves. Honestly, I don't understand why they are so determined to make me look like the bad guy now, especially when I don't think I've done anything to hurt them other than that email. It doesn't make sense to me. But they are clearly desperate and are grasping at straws. For me, this chapter is closed and now I'm just going to concentrate on my newlywed life because that time won't come back. I can deal with the drama later. I'm sure this won't be the end of this situation and they'll do everything they can to drag it out indefinitely. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update and last night Gerald and my parents decided to include me in a conference call. They were calling from disposable phones, so I don't have those numbers saved, but it was obvious that it was them. I was at home with my wife and I decided to answer because I wanted to annoy them a little, and I succeeded. When I answered, I spent the first 5 minutes pretending that I couldn't hear them, and although they had called me with the intention of shouting at me, They had to make sure first that they were at least audible. So before saying anything, they had to coordinate with me and it was a lot of fun. After that, they finally got to the point and started telling me that the rest of the family was not on good terms with them. They were all very upset about their behavior and thought that my parents and Gerald had been extremely mean, so now they expected me to do something about it. I didn't know what they had in mind, so I asked them what they wanted me to do, although I had no intention of agreeing. I decided to play along just for fun, but they thought I was being sincere. They told me that a lot of things had been said on all sides and that at the end of the day, the only thing that was being damaged was the reputation of our family as a whole. I found it strange that they said that because, as far as I was concerned, this whole incident hadn't affected my image or reputation. People still liked me, but I guess they just wanted to make me feel like this had something to do with me so that I would be more receptive to what they were asking. They told me they wanted to send another statement by mail saying that we had decided to patch things up and had forgiven each other because, after all, we were still family. They said it was the only way to fix our reputation because they didn't want to become the laughingstock and gossip topic for the rest of the family, but I could see through their intentions. I knew they were only willing to pretend that we had forgiven each other because no one had believed the lies they had been spreading about me. If they didn't want to be excluded from the family, they had to pretend that everything was fine between us so that the rest would follow their example, but I was done playing along. I refused outright and made it very clear to them that it was they who wanted to fix their reputation, not me. I had no reason to play along and pretend that I had forgiven them. I also had a big problem with the way they had put it that we had forgiven each other because I don't think they are in a position to forgive me. I have done nothing wrong. I may have said some things in the heat of the moment, but in the end it was their decision to skip my wedding and attend the birthday party. Everything that happened after that was a consequence of their behavior. I made it very clear to them that I did not agree with their proposal. And if they wanted to continue being angry with me and spreading lies in the hope that someone would believe them, they were free to do so. Of course, after that my parents and Gerald were furious. He told me that this was all my fault, that if I had done the right thing instead of being petty and not inviting him to such an important family event, none of this would have happened. It was clear that he felt spurned and for a moment I felt bad. But then I remembered it was my wedding. I'm not obliged to invite anyone, especially when I don't even get on with them and they know it. I told Gerald and we had an argument on the phone. He called me mean and I told him it was absurd for him to expect to be invited, especially after having had practically no contact outside of family events for the last 2 years. If he had wanted me to be nice to him, maybe he should have behaved the same towards me, but he has never invited me to any of his events, although they have never been as significant as a wedding or an engagement, but that's beside the point. The point is that he has never been nice to me, so I don't understand why I expected to be invited to the wedding. After a while, things got too noisy and annoying. Gerald was shouting and my parents were shouting about something else that I couldn't understand, so I just hung up on them and blocked those numbers too. I don't entirely regret it. I had a bit of fun with them, but if they call again, I don't think I'll answer because, although it was entertaining at first, it got quite tiring in the end and I've had enough. Update 3. It's been a couple of days since my last update and today in the early hours, around 4, my phone started ringing. It was an unknown number, so I didn't answer because I was sure it was Gerald or one of my parents. Besides, it was 4 in the morning and I had no intention of getting into an argument with them at that moment, especially since I had to go to work in a couple of hours. But about 30 minutes after not answering, we started to hear people shouting outside our house and someone ringing the doorbell non-stop while banging on the door. It was very alarming and it took us a while to process what was happening. Soon, my wife and I realized that it was my parents and Gerald outside. They insisted that we needed to open up because they wanted to talk to us, saying that what I was doing was ruining their lives as they had been completely shunned by the rest of the family and it was all my fault. If it had been at any other time of the day, I might have felt slightly annoyed, but it being 4 in the morning, I was furious. Because regardless of everything, they can't harass people like that and they were being very noisy. I was sure the neighbors could hear them. Although they didn't say anything about it later and were kind enough to pretend nothing had happened, I knew they had been disturbed by the racket and it was quite embarrassing for me. When I heard them outside, I didn't even think twice. I just called the police because I'd had enough. During the time it took for them to arrive, my wife and I just stayed in bed and let them shout until they were hoarse. We were so upset about what was happening that we didn't even get out of bed until the police arrived. Then we explained the whole situation and made them leave our property, but by then we had already lost a lot of sleep and had to miss work that day. It is extremely annoying that we lost a whole day's work because of their senseless behavior, because I really can't understand why they had to get so upset at that hour because people didn't talk to them. We've had enough and after this, If anything else happens, I think we're going to apply for a restraining order. Moving or changing numbers is a big problem that could be costly or time-consuming, so that won't be possible for now, but applying for a restraining order is the least we can try, even though we haven't exactly been threatened. I don't know if we have enough grounds for it. We're going to talk to a lawyer to see how this develops. Update 4. It's been a couple of days since the early morning incident, and that same afternoon we spoke to a lawyer. As my parents and Gerald were only trespassing and causing a ruckus but had not hurt anyone or damaged anything, they only received a warning for disorderly conduct and no charges were filed. But fortunately, we still have grounds for a restraining order because of their behavior. We decided to go ahead with it today and they were served with a notice. In a couple of days, we will be going to court to put an end to this, which will be a great relief. I have already spoken to many people in my family about this. I don't see the point in hiding their behavior, and it is really surprising that they are acting like this, especially since before this they had never cared much about the rest of the family. It's true, my parents were never very close to the rest of the family, and as for Gerald, he hardly talks to anyone. So the fact that people have cut them off shouldn't affect them as much as it has. I guess this isn't about the family cutting them off at all. They just want to cause me problems and that's all. Well, I hope they're happy now because the only person they've ended up messing things up for is themselves, and now they'll have to face the consequences of their actions. It's so sad that all this drama could have been avoided if my parents and my brother had simply behaved like normal, reasonable people, but they had to go above and beyond to embarrass themselves and, by extension, me too. It's not like I'm enjoying this process. It's actually quite sad that I have to apply for a restraining order against my own family, but the situation calls for it and I have no other option. This is really pathetic. Update 5. It's been 4 weeks since my last update, and the 2-year restraining order against my family was recently granted, which is very positive. The rest of the family are still showing solidarity with us, as they have done from the beginning, but now they have not only completely cut off contact with them and stopped inviting them to events, but they have also started to keep in more contact with me, making sure I am well and checking up on me. Although most of the time I feel completely fine, there are times when I feel that what happened with my family is really sad. I really appreciate that the rest of the family is trying to make up for it by having this support system. There is nothing in the world that I would trade for this. I feel particularly close to everyone, especially my cousins, as they have been at the forefront of everything, helping me both emotionally and practically, even putting me in touch with a good lawyer. I'm so grateful for everything everyone has done for me, and I think it's time to start a new chapter. My wife and I are leaving on our honeymoon in a couple of days, and when we get back, I hope things feel different. I know a change of scenery is exactly what we need, so I'm pretty excited about it. The next week and a half are going to be great, and I'm just going to ignore everything related to my parents or Gerald. I'm not going to let them ruin this for me, like they tried to do with my wedding, and I'm determined to make it work. Anyway, with that said, thank you to everyone who kept up to date with what was going on with me. And for all the support I've received in the comments. See you.